This is day 7 of the June 88 7-day retreat. We will read selections from the Zen teaching of Huang and 2 books by Krishnamurti. Since this material is copyrighted, the tape will not be for sale. The volume by Huang is called The Zen Teaching of Huang, translated by John Blofeld. We've read innumerable times from this book. Usually the same selections which have been abbreviated, words or sentences or parts of sentences taken out for clarity, for the sake of clarity. The book itself was put together by the scholar disciple of Huang who was also the governor of the province where Huang taught. There are dialogues and what is in the translation called sermons. The word Dharma, for people who are not trained in Buddhist terminology, Dharma with a capital D means the teaching, the Buddha's teaching. And the word Buddha does not only refer to the historical person, but also it is a Sanskrit word for absolute truth or awakened truth. One has heard this over and over, but can the ears be fresh and new? Then something new is heard. This dialogue took place about 1,000 years ago in China. The questioner, which is the compiler of the book, the scholar, disciple, the questioner asks, "What is the way? And how must it be followed?" Is that new? Is that old? What is the way and how must it be followed? Huang says, what sort of thing do you suppose the way to be that you would wish to follow it? Questioner, what instructions have the masters everywhere given for meditation practice and the study of the Dharma? Dharma means truth. Huang words used to attract the dull of wit are not to be relied on. Questioner, if those teachings were meant for the dull-witted, I have yet to hear what truth has been taught to those of really high capacity. Huang if they're really people of high capacity, where could they find people to follow? If they seek from within themselves, they will find nothing tangible. How much less can they find a truth worthy of their attention elsewhere? Do not look to what is called the Dharma by preachers, for what sort of Dharma could that be? Questioner, if that is so, should we not seek for anything at all? Huang Po, by conceding this, you would save yourself a lot of mental effort. Questioner, but in this way, everything would be eliminated. There cannot just be nothing. Huang Po, who called it nothing? Who was this fellow? But you wanted to seek for something. Questioner, since there is no need to seek, why do you also say that not everything is eliminated? Does that strike home? If there's no goal, then isn't everything just gone? Nothing there to give energy or inspiration. To us, the value of living lies in the goal that we strive for. Unless we wake up to this. And he says, since there's no need to seek, why do you also say that not everything is eliminated? And Huang Po says, not to seek is to rest tranquil. Who told you to eliminate anything? Look at the void in front of your eyes. How can you produce it or eliminate it? The question says, if I could reach this Dharma, this truth, would it be like the void? Huang Po, morning and night I have explained to you that the void is both one and the manifold. I said this as a temporary expedient, but you're building up concepts from it. Questioner, do you mean we should not form concepts as human beings normally do? Huang Po, I have not prevented you, but concepts are related to the senses, and when reaction takes place and concepts are formed, wisdom is shut out. Questioner, then should we avoid any feeling in relation to the Dharma? Huang Po, where no feeling arises, who can say that you're right? Questioner, why do you speak as though I was mistaken in all the questions I've asked your reverence? Huang Po says, you're a man who doesn't understand what is said to him. What is all this about being mistaken? Questioner, up to now you have refuted everything which has been said. You have done nothing to point out the true Dharma to us. Huang Po, in the true Dharma there is no confusion, but you produce confusion by such questions. What sort of true Dharma can you go seeking for? Or what sort of truth can you go seeking for? Questioner, since the confusion arises from my questions, what will your reverence's answer be? Huang Po, observe things as they are and don't pay attention to other people. There are some people just like mad dogs barking at everything that moves, even barking when the wind stirs among the grass and leaves. And he goes on, regarding this Zen doctrine of ours, since it was first transmitted, it has never taught that men should seek for learning or form concepts. Studying the way is just a figure of speech. It is a method arousing people's interest in the early stages. In fact, the way is not something that can be studied. Study leads to the retention of concepts, and so the way is entirely misunderstood. Moreover, the way is not something especially existing. Truly, it is not located anywhere. The first step is to refrain from knowledge-based concepts. This implies that if you were to follow any empirical method to the utmost limit, on reaching that limit, you would still be unable to locate mind. It's put here with a capital M. The way is spiritual truth and was originally without name or title. It was only because people ignorantly sought for it empirically that someone appeared, or the Buddhas appeared, and taught them to eradicate this method of approach. Fearing that nobody would understand, they selected the name way. You must not allow this name to lead you into forming a mental concept of a road. So it is said, when the fish is caught, we pay no more attention to the trap. Is that so? Or does the trap assume all importance? Here he says, if you would spend all your time walking, standing, sitting, or lying down, learning to halt the concept-forming activities of your own mind, you would be sure of ultimately attaining the goal. Since your strength is insufficient, you may not be able to do it in a single leap by a single leap, but after 5 or 10 years, you would surely have made a good beginning and be able to make further progress spontaneously. He's talking of the progress again. Doesn't one latch on to that? It sounds so good. It is because you're not that sort of man that you feel obliged to employ your mind studying the way or studying meditation. So it is said that all the Buddha taught was like pretending yellow leaves are real gold, just to stop the flow of a child's tears. It must by no means be regarded as though it were the ultimate truth. What is called supreme perfect wisdom implies that there is really nothing whatsoever to be attained. He goes on, if you're also able to understand this, you will realize that the way of the Buddhas and the way of the devils are equally wide of the mark. The original pure, glistening universe is neither square nor round, big nor small. It is without any such distinctions as long or short. It is beyond attachment and activity, ignorance and enlightenment. You must see clearly that there is really nothing at all. The great chilocosms, numberless as grains of sand, are mere bubbles. All wisdom and all holiness are but streaks of lightning. None of them have the reality of mind. Mind is one. How can it lack a single hair of anything? Once I put this question to the Master: how many of the 400 or 500 persons gathered here on this mountain have fully understood your Reverence's teaching? The Master answered, their number cannot be known. Why? Because this way is through mind awakening. How can it be conveyed in words? Speech only produces some effect when it falls on the uninstructed ears of children. Here he says, though others may talk of the way of the Buddhas as something to be reached by various pious practices and sutra study, scripture study, you must have nothing to do with such ideas. A perception, sudden as blinking, that subject and object are one, will lead to a deeply mysterious, wordless understanding. And by this understanding, you awake to the truth. When you happen upon someone who has no understanding, you must claim to know nothing. He may be delighted by his discovery of some way to enlightenment, yet if you allow yourselves to be persuaded by him, you will experience no delight at all, but suffer both thorough sorrow and disappointment. What have such thoughts as this to do with a study of truth or study of Zen? Even if you do obtain from him some trifling method, it will only be a thought-constructed thing having nothing to do with truth. Truth is something never lost to you even in moments of delusion, nor is it gained at the moment of enlightenment. It depends on nothing and it is attached to nothing. It is all-pervading, spotless beauty. It is the self-existent and uncreated absolute. It is a jewel beyond all price. In the last selection, question about how can we prevent ourselves from falling into the error of making distinctions between this and that. Wangpo, by realizing that though you eat the whole day through, not a single grain has passed your lips, and that a day's journey has not taken you a single step forward. Also, by uniformly abstaining from such notions as self and other, do not permit the events of your daily lives to bind you, but never withdraw yourselves from them. Avoid the error of thinking in terms of past, present, and future. The past has gone, the present is a fleeting moment, and the future is yet to come. When you practice meditation, sit in the proper position, stay perfectly tranquil, and do not permit the least movement of your minds to disturb you. This alone is what is called liberation. Be diligent, be diligent. The next selections are from Krishnamurti's notebook. He started keeping a diary in 1960, something or other, in the 60s. He kept it in Ojai, London, Gstaad, Switzerland, Paris, Rome, Bombay, Madras, Rajghat, and Delhi. Kept it for about a half a year. This is almost unedited. Some paragraphs have been left out. Early this morning, the sky was without a cloud. The sun was coming up behind the Tuscan hills, gray with olive, with dark cypress. There were no shadows on the river, and the aspen leaves were still. A few birds that had not yet migrated were chattering, and the river seemed motionless. As the sun came up behind the river, it cast long shadows on the quiet water. But a gentle breeze was coming over the hills and through the valleys. It was among the leaves, setting them trembling and dancing with the morning sun on them. There were long and short shadows, fat ones and little ones, on the brown, sparkling waters. A solitary chimney began to smoke, grey fumes carrying across the trees. It was a lovely morning, full of enchantment and beauty. There were so many shadows and so many leaves trembling. There was perfume in the air, and though it was an autumnal sun, there was the breath of spring. A small car was going up the hill, making an awful noise, but 1,000 shadows remained motionless. It was a lovely morning. The intense energy of life is always there, night and day. It is without friction, without direction, without choice and effort. It is there with such intensity that thought and feeling cannot capture it to mold it according to their fancies, beliefs, experiences, and demands. It is there with such abundance that nothing can diminish it. But we try to use it, to give it direction, to capture it within the mold of our existence, and thereby twist it to conform to our pattern, experience, and knowledge. It is ambition, envy, greed that narrow down its energy, and so there is conflict and sorrow. The cruelty of ambition, personal or collective, distorts its intensity, causing hatred, antagonism, conflict. Every action of envy perverts this energy, causing discontent, misery, fear. With fear there is guilt and anxiety and the never-ending misery of comparison and imitation. It is this perverted energy that makes the priest and the general, the politician and the thief. This boundless energy, made incomplete by our desire for permanency and security, is the soil in which grow barren ideas, competition, cruelty, and war. It is the cause of everlasting conflict between man and man. When all this is put aside, with ease and without effort, then only is there that intense energy which can only exist and flower in freedom. In freedom alone it causes no conflict and sorrow. Then alone it increases and has no end. It is life that has no beginning and no end. It is creation which is love, destruction. Energy used in one direction leads to one thing, conflict and sorrow. Energy that is the expression of total life is bliss beyond measure. There is a red flower among the dark green leaves, and from the veranda you only see that. There are the hills, the red sand of the riverbeds, the big high banyan tree and the many tamarinds, but you only see that flower. It is so gay, so full of color. There is no other color. The patches of blue sky, the burning clouds of light, the violet hills, the rich green of the rice fields, all these fade away, and only this wondrous color of that flower remains. It fills the whole sky and the valley. It will fade and fall away. It will cease, and the hills will endure. But this morning it was eternity, beyond all time and thought. It held all love and joy. There was no sentiment and romantic absurdities in it, nor was it a symbol of something else. It was itself, to die in the evening, but it contained all life. It was not something you reasoned out, nor was it a thing of unreason, nor some romantic fancy. It was as actual as those hills and those voices calling to each other. It was the complete meditation of life, and illusion exists only when the impact of fact ceases. The cloud so full of light is a reality whose beauty has no furious impact on a mind that is made dull and insensitive by influence, habit, and the everlasting search for security. Security in fame, in relationship, in knowledge, destroys sensitivity and deterioration sets in. That flower, those hills, and the blue restless sea are the challenges as nuclear bombs of life. And only the sensitive mind can respond to them totally. Only a total response leaves no marks of conflict, and conflict indicates partial response. The so-called saints and sannyasis have contributed to the dullness of mind and to the destruction of sensitivity. Every habit, repetition, rituals strengthened by belief and dogma, sensory responses can be refined, but the alert awareness, sensitivity is quite another matter. Sensitivity is absolutely essential to look deeply within. This movement of going within is not a reaction to the outer. The outer and the inner are the same movement. As the outer and as the inner breeds, no, they are not separate. It's the same movement, they are not separate. The division of this movement as the outer and as the inner breeds insensitivity. Going within is the natural flow of the outer. The movement of the inner has its own action, expressed outwardly, but it is not a reaction of the outer. Awareness of this whole movement is sensitivity. There is something curiously pleasant to walk alone along a path deep in the country, which has been used for several thousand years by pilgrims. There are very old trees along it, tamarind and mango, and it passes through several villages. It passes between green fields of wheat. It is soft underfoot, fine dry powder, and it must become heavy clay in the wet season. The soft, fine earth gets into your feet, into your nose and eyes, not too much. There are ancient wells and temples and withering gods. The land is flat, flat as the palm of the hand, stretching to the horizon if there is a horizon. The path has so many turns, in a few minutes it faces in all the directions of a compass. The sky seems to follow that path, which is open and friendly. There are few paths like that in the world, though each has its own charm and beauty. There is one at Gstaad that goes through the valley, gently climbing between rich pasturage, to be gathered for the winter, to be given to the cows. That valley is white with snow, but then it was at the end of the summer, full of flowers, with snow mountains all around, and there was a noisy stream going through the valley. There was hardly anyone on that path, and you walked on it in silence. Then there's another path, the editor says at Ojai, climbing steeply by the side of a dry, dusty, crumbling mountain. It was rocky, rough, and slippery. There wasn't a tree anywhere near, nor even a bush. A quail with her small new brood, over a dozen of them, was there, and further up you came upon a deadly rattler, all curled up, ready to strike, but giving you a fair warning. But now, this path was not like any other. It was dusty, made foul by human beings here and there were ruined old temples with their images. A large bull was having its fill among the growing grain, unmolested. There were monkeys too and parrots, the light of the skies. It was a path of 1,000 humans for many thousand years. As you walked on it, you were lost. You walked without a single thought, and there was the incredible sky and the trees with heavy foliage and birds. There is a mango on that path that is superb. It has so many leaves that the branches cannot be seen, and it is so old. As you walk on, there is no feeling at all. Thought too has gone, but there is beauty. It fills the earth and the sky, every leaf and blade of withering grass. It is there, covering everything, and you are of it. You are not made to feel all this, but it is there. And because you're not, it is there, without a word, without a movement. You walk back in silence and fading light. Every experience leaves a mark, and every mark distorts experience. So there's no experience which has not been. Everything is old and nothing new. But this is not so. All the marks of all experiences are wiped away. The brain, the storehouse of the past, becomes completely quiet and motionless, without reaction, but alive, sensitive. Then it loses the past and is made new again. It was there, that immensity, having no past, no future. It was there without ever knowing the present. It filled the room, expanding beyond all measure. The trees were bare, every leaf had fallen off, even the thin, delicate stems were breaking off. The cold had been too much for them. There were other trees which kept their leaves, but they were not too green, some of them were turning brown. It was an exceptionally cold winter. There was heavy snow all along the lower ranges of the Himalayas, several feet thick, and in the plains a few hundred miles away it was quite cold. There was heavy frost on the ground, and all flowers were not blooming. The lawns were burnt. There were a few roses whose color filled the little garden, and the yellow pansies. But on the roads and public places you saw the poor, wrapped up in torn, filthy rags, bare-legged, their heads covered up, their dark faces hardly showing. The women had every kind of colored cloth on them, dirty, with silver bangles or some ornament around their ankles and around their wrists. They walked freely, easily, and with a certain grace. They held themselves well. Most of them were laborers, but in the evening as they went back to their homes, huts really, they would be laughing, teasing each other, and the young would be shouting and laughing, far ahead of the older people. It was the end of the day, and they had been laboring heavily all day. They would wear themselves out very quickly, and they had built houses and offices where they would never live or even work. All the important people went by there in their cars, and these poor people never even bothered to look who went by. The sun was setting behind some ornate building in a mist that had been hanging all about all day. It had no color, no warmth. There wasn't a flutter among the flags of different countries. These flags were so weary, they were just colored rags, but what importance they had assumed. A few crows were drinking out of a puddle, and other crows were coming in to have their share. The sky was pale and ready for the night. Every thought, every feeling was gone, and the brain was utterly still. It was past midnight, and there was no noise. It was cold, and the moonlight was coming in through one of the windows. It made a pattern on the wall. The brain was very awake, watching without reacting, without experiencing. There was not a movement within itself, but it was not insensitive or drugged by memory. All of a sudden that unknowable immensity was there, not only in the room and beyond, but also deep in the innermost recesses, which was once the mind. Thought has a border, produced by every kind of reaction, and every motive shapes it as with every feeling. Every experiencing is from the past, and every recognition is from the known. But that immensity left no mark. It was there, clear, strong, impenetrable, and unapproachable, whose intensity was fire that left no ash. With it was bliss, and that too left no memory, for there was no experiencing it. It simply was there to come and go without pursuit and recall. The past and the unknown do not meet at any point. They cannot be brought together by any act whatsoever. There is no bridge to cross over, nor a path that leads to it. The two have never met, nor will they ever meet. The past has to cease for the unknowable, for that immensity to be. This book is called Krishnamurti to Himself, His Last Journal. Just came out very recently. He did not keep this diary by writing, but someone suggested he speak into a tape recorder, which he did. And these are transcription. The editor says they were slightly edited because at times the voice was inaudible. These selections were written 1983, and almost all of them in Ojai, California. There is a tree by the river, and we have been watching it day after day for several weeks when the sun is about to rise. As the sun rises slowly over the horizon, over the trees, this particular tree becomes all of a sudden golden. All the leaves are bright with life, and as you watch it as the hours pass by, that tree, whose name does not matter, what matters is that beautiful tree. An extraordinary quality seems to spread all over the land, over the river. And as the sun rises a little higher, the leaves begin to flutter, to dance. And each hour seems to give to that tree a different quality. Before the sun rises, it has a somber feeling, quiet, far away, full of dignity. And as the day begins, the leaves, with a light on them, dance and give it that peculiar feeling that one has of great beauty. By midday, its shadow has deepened, and you can sit there, protected from the sun, never feeling lonely, with a tree as your companion. As you sit there, there's a relationship of deep, abiding security and a freedom that only trees can know. Towards the evening, when the western skies are lit up by the setting sun, the tree gradually becomes somber, dark, closing in on itself. The sky has become red, yellow, green, but the tree remains quiet, hidden, and is resting for the night. If you establish a relationship with it, then you have relationship with mankind. You are responsible then for that tree and for the trees of the world. But if you have no relationship with the living things on this earth, you may lose whatever relationship you have with humanity, with human beings. We never look deeply into the quality of a tree. We never really touch it, feel its solidity, its rough bark, and hear the sound that is part of the tree. Not the sound of wind through the leaves, not the breeze of a morning that flutters the leaves, but its own sound, the sound of the trunk and the silent sound of the roots. Must be extraordinarily sensitive to hear the sound. This sound is not the noise of the world, not the noise of the chattering of the mind, not the vulgarity of human quarrels and human warfare, but sound as part of the universe. It is odd that we have so little relationship with nature, with the insects and the leaping frog and the owl that hoots among the hills, calling for its mate. We never seem to have a feeling for all living things on the earth. If we could establish a deep, abiding relationship with nature, we would never kill an animal for our appetite. We would never harm, vivisect a monkey, a dog, a guinea pig for our benefit. We would find other ways to heal our wounds, heal our bodies. But the healing of the mind is something totally different. That healing gradually takes place if you are with nature, with that orange on the tree and the blade of grass that pushes through the ground and the hills covered, hidden by the clouds. It was a cool, fresh morning, and there was the light that California alone has, especially the southern part of it. It is really quite an extraordinary light. We have traveled probably all over the world, most of the world at least, have seen various lights and clouds in many parts of the earth. The clouds in Holland are very close. Here in California, the clouds against the blue sky seem to hold the light everlastingly. The light that great clouds have, with their extraordinary shape and quality. It was a cool, very nice morning, and as you climbed the rocky path up to the great height and looked down into the valley and saw the row upon row of orange trees, avocados, in the hills that surround the valley, it was as though you were out of this world, so completely lost were you to all things, to the weariness, to man's ugly reactions and actions. You left all that behind as you climbed up and up the rocky path. You left behind far below you the vanity, the arrogance, the vulgarity of uniforms, decorations spread all over your chest, and the vanity and strange costumes of priests. You left all that behind. And as you went up, you nearly trod on a mother with her dozen or more little baby quails, and they scattered with chirping into the bushes. As you went on up and looked back, the mother had again gathered them round her, and they were all quite secure under the wings of their mother. You had to climb hour after hour to reach the great height. Some days you saw a bear a little way off, and it paid no attention. And the deer across the gully, they too seemed unconcerned. At last you reached the height of a rocky plateau, and across the hills to the southwest you saw the distant sea, so blue, so quiet, so infinitely far away. You sat on a rock, smooth, cracked, where the sun must for century upon century without any regret have cracked it. And in the little cracks you saw tiny little living things scurrying about, and there was that utter silence, complete and infinite. A very large bird, they call it a condor, was circling in the sky. Apart from that movement, there was nothing astir except these tiny little insects. But there was that silence that exists only where man has not been before. It was so peaceful. You left everything behind in that little village so far below you. Literally everything. Your identity, if you had any, your belongings, the possessions of your experiences, your memories of things that had meant something to you. You left all that behind down below there amidst the shining groves and orchards. Here, there was absolute silence, and you were totally alone. It was a marvelous morning, and the cool air, which was becoming colder, wrapped round you, and you were completely lost to everything. There was nothing and beyond nothing. You should really forget the word meditation. That word has been corrupted. The ordinary meaning of that word, to ponder over, to consider, to think about, is rather trivial and ordinary. If you want to understand the nature of meditation, you should really forget the word, because you cannot possibly measure with words that which is not measurable, that which is beyond all measure. No words can convey it, nor any systems, modes of thought, practices, or discipline. Meditation, or rather, if we could find another word which has not been so mutilated, made so ordinary, corrupt, which has become the means of earning a great deal of money. If you can put aside that word, then you begin quietly and gently to feel a movement that is not of time. Again, the word movement implies time. What is meant is a movement that has no beginning or end, a movement in the sense of a wave, wave upon wave, starting from nowhere and with no beach to crash upon. It is an endless wave. Time, however slow it is rather tiresome. Time means growth, evolution, to become, to achieve, to learn, to change. And time is not the way of that which lies far beyond the word meditation. Time has nothing to do with it. Time is the action of will, of desire, and desire cannot in any way, and the words are inaudible here, it lies far beyond the word meditation. Here, sitting on that rock with a blue sky, it is astonishingly blue. The air is so pure, unpolluted. Far beyond this range is the desert. You can see it, miles of it. It is really a timeless perception of that which is. It is only that perception which can say it is. You sat there watching for what seemed many days, many years, many centuries. As the sun was going down to the sea, you made your way down to the valley, and everything around you was alight. That blade of grass, that sumac, the towering eucalyptus, and the flowering earth. It took time to come down, as it had taken time to go up. And meditation is only a word. The roots of heaven are in deep, abiding silence. This is the last selection in this book, the last that he spoke into the microphone, I think less than 2 years before his death, March 84. Walking down the straight road on a lovely morning, it was spring, and the sky was extraordinarily blue. There wasn't a cloud in it, and the sun was just warm, not too hot. It felt nice. And the leaves were shining, and a sparkle was in the air. It was really a most extraordinarily beautiful morning. The high mountain was there, impenetrable, and the hills below were green and lovely. And as you walked along quietly, without much thought, you saw a dead leaf, yellow and bright red, a leaf from the autumn. How beautiful that leaf was, so simple in its death, so lively, full of the beauty and vitality of the whole tree and the summer. Strange that it had not withered. Looking at it more closely, one saw all the veins and the stem and the shape of that leaf. That leaf was all the tree. Why do human beings die so miserably, so unhappily? With a disease, old age, senility, the body shrunk, ugly. Why can't they die naturally and as beautiful as this leaf? In spite of all the doctors, medicines, and hospitals, operations, and all the agony of life, and the pleasures too, we don't seem to die with dignity, simplicity, and with a smile. Once, walking along a lane, one heard behind one a chant, melodious, rhythmic, with the ancient strength of Sanskrit. One stopped and looked around. An eldest son, naked to his waist, was carrying a terracotta pot with a fire burning in it. He was holding it in another vessel, and behind him were two men carrying his dead father, covered with a white cloth, and they were all chanting. One knew what that chant was, one almost joined in. They went past, and one followed them. They were going down the road chanting, and the eldest son was in tears. They carried the father to the beach, where they had already collected a great pile of wood, and they had laid the body on top of that heap of wood and set it on fire. It was all so natural, so extraordinarily simple. There were no flowers, there was no hearse, there were no black carriages with black horses. It was all very quiet and utterly dignified. And one looked at that leaf and 1,000 leaves of the tree. The winter brought that leaf from its mother onto that path, and it would presently die out completely and wither, be gone, carried away by the winds and lost. As you teach children mathematics, writing, reading, and all the business of acquiring knowledge, they should also be taught the great dignity of death, not as a morbid, unhappy thing that one has to face eventually, but as something of daily life. The daily life of looking at the blue sky and the grasshopper on a leaf. It is part of learning as you grow teeth and have all the discomfort of childish illnesses. Children have extraordinary curiosity. If you see the nature of death, you don't explain that everything dies, dust to dust and so on, but without any fear you explain it to them gently and make them feel that the living and the dying are one, not at the end of one's life after 50, 60 or 90 years, but that death is like that leaf. You can leave her. She doesn't disturb, does she? Heather is being carried away. Look at the old men and women, how lost, how unhappy they look. Is it because they have not really understood either the living or the dying? They have used life, they waste away their life with incessant conflict, which only exercises and gives strength to the self, the me, the ego. We spend our days in such varieties of conflict and unhappinesses, with some joy and pleasure, drinking, smoking, late nights and work, work, work. And at the end of one's life, one faces that thing called death and is frightened of it. One thinks it can always be understood, felt deeply. The child with his curiosity can be helped to understand that death is not merely the wasting of the body through disease, old age, or some unexpected accident, but that the ending of every day is also the ending of oneself every day. I'll read that again. One thinks it can always be understood, felt deeply. This thing called death, he says. The child with his curiosity can be helped to understand that death is not merely the wasting of the body through disease, old age, and some unexpected accident, but that the ending of every day is also the ending of oneself every day. There is no resurrection that is superstition, a dogmatic belief. Everything on earth, on this beautiful earth, lives, dies, comes into being, and withers away. To grasp this whole movement of life requires intelligence. Not the intelligence of thought or books or knowledge, but the intelligence of love and compassion with its sensitivity. One is very certain that if the educator understands the significance of death and the dignity of it, the extraordinary simplicity of dying, understands it not intellectually but deeply, then he may be able to convey to the student, to the child, that dying, the ending, is not to be avoided, is something not to be frightened of, for it is part of one's whole life, so that as the student, the child, grows up, he will never be frightened of the ending. If all human beings who have lived before us, past generations upon generations, still lived on this earth, how terrible it would be. The beginning is not the ending. And one would like to help. No, that's the wrong word. One would like in education to bring death into some kind of reality, actuality, not of someone else dying, but of each one of us, however old or young, having inevitably to face that thing. It is not a sad affair of tears, of loneliness, of separation. We kill so easily, not only the animals for one's food, but the vast, unnecessary killing for amusement called sport, killing a deer because that is the season. Killing a deer is like killing your neighbor. You kill animals because you have lost touch with nature, with all the living things on this earth. You kill in wars for so many romantic, nationalistic, political ideologies. In the name of God, you have killed people. Violence and killing go together. As one looked at that dead leaf, with all its beauty and color, maybe one would very deeply comprehend, be aware of what one's own death must be, not at the very end, but at the very beginning. Death isn't some horrific thing, something to be avoided, something to be postponed, but rather something to be with day in and day out. And out of that comes an extraordinary sense of immensity. we will end here for today.